What is the grossest act of revenge you've ever played a part in? I used to be a cocktail waitress, and for some reason, guys would automatically think that because I worked at a bar, they could grab or pinch me. I reported it a few times because many would slap and pinch so hard there'd be bruises. Nothing changed. I was pretty much told to deal with it. Well, I thought that was BS, so I sewed tacks into some boy's short garments, pointy side facing out, completely covering my back. Whenever someone grabbed or slapped my behind, they got pricked by a ton of little needles. I ended up getting in trouble for it, which I thought was so stupid, but I'm pretty sure that it was one of my best ideas to date. So I wonder if she offered a tactical training to the other waitresses. It could be a new employee perk. The scriptwriter told me to say that. Story 2. There was this guy, Steve, that was friends with my neighbor who was also a well-off, mad at his parents' little thug. Well, this Steve fellow thought it was funny to throw a basketball at my dad's work van. My dad witnessed this through the window and ran out to check on the damage. The schmuck takes off running and my father inspects the dents they left on the back door of his vehicle. He's fuming mad, but the kid's parents are out of town for the weekend. Cut to 10:30 that night and these punks are hammered. It was just the two of them drinking the one kid's dad's beer. Steve is out in the backyard and the neighbor boy asked us to help carry him inside. My little brother and I walk over and drag Steve into their basement and the neighbor goes and passes out too. That's when my brother devises and coordinates the most deprived human act I've ever witnessed. He craps in a plastic bag and proceeds to unload the contents of said plastic bag into the back of Steve's sagging sweatpants. Steve never spoke a word about it. He thinks he crapped himself to this day. My neighbor is in jail for 6 counts of burglary now. Story 3. Had a huge disagreement with my bank a few years ago. They were totally wrong, refused to admit it or refund the cost that I incurred. So I went to the grocery store and bought a huge piece of fish, then went to said bank and put the fish into my safety deposit box. Went into the bank a couple of times in the next week or two. You could smell something fishy, but it was not overpowering. However, about a week later, I got a phone call from the bank asking me to come in. When I entered the bank, it stunk to high heavens in there. The manager who had goofed me during the prior disagreement was there having a few other people open their safety deposit boxes. My turn to open mine. The stench was awful. I open it up and sure enough, there is a piece of fish in it. The manager screamed at me, "You put a piece of fish in your safety deposit box?" I said, "Hey pal, do you know the price of salmon these days?" Told him to get the heck out of my way and walked out. I felt a little bad that I inconvenienced other safety deposit box holders, but it was so worth it. Take that, CIBC. Story 4. Not my story, but an old maintenance guy from my old apartment complex. He heard that many cars were being broken into and he had just bought a new Jeep. Within a week, the Jeep was broken into, so he replaced his windows, filed a police report, and called it good. The next week, however, he walked outside and saw that his windows were broken out again. He got everything repaired and did the same thing with the police report and all. He ended up buying a new radio that probably had the latest and greatest tape player, but he knew that break-ins were still occurring in his neighborhood. This is when he thought to tape razor blades underneath the stereo in the rear so when someone grabbed it, it would hurt their fingers. Within a week, he walks outside and realizes his window is broken out again. But he remembered that he taped the razor blades to the stereo. So he walks up to his Jeep and describes it as a crime scene. He said there was red liquid everywhere along with a trail on the sidewalk from the person that broke in. But his stereo was still there. No one ever messed with his Jeep again. He said he still felt really bad for it, but he got to keep his radio. Story 5. When I was in first grade, I was taking a whiz at the private, mostly Jewish school I went to. I was minding my own business when the school oppressor grabbed me by the shoulder and pushed me. In the confusion, I ended up turning around with my little member hanging out for the world to see. Being that I am uncut in a mostly Jewish school, the oppressor and his posse started to point and laugh at my sheathed sword. So I bit him. I was promptly expelled. Story 6. My cousin's ex-husband worked at a factory where there was one schmuck, his name was Manuel, who was notorious for getting into people's lunches and eating what he wanted out of them. These were big blue-collar guys who often brought 2 or 3 sandwiches, so Manuel would eat a sandwich or 2 out of a couple of lunches every day, as what he thought was a joke. One of his frequent victims didn't find it so funny. One day, the victim took a couple of slices of bread into the men's room with him and basically took a crap, slapped a piece of lettuce on it, put mustard and mayo on the other, slid the works into a baggie, put it into a brown sack, and stuck it in the fridge in the break room. Of course, Manuel got a hold of it, and while the guys who were in on the prank could barely keep a straight face as they all sat around the lunch table, he whipped out the sandwich and took a big bite. My cousin's ex said he would never have believed that a human being could actually turn the color green, but Manuel did. In fact, they had to call an ambulance and rush him to the hospital. So I guess Manuel got the last laugh, a paid sick week off, unless you take into account his new nickname that stayed with him long after the incident, Manuel Crap Sandwich. Story 7. It was the beginning of the year in early primary elementary school, and we were making A3 posters that were to decorate the school hall. As one may know, one of the worst crimes in this period of development is the eraser napper. The thief in question had my eraser more than I did. Cunningly, I took my eraser and dipped the edge he had been using into some ink. Shortly after, a hand slithered across the desk. My newly modified eraser was gone. Just as time wasn't used for permission, time wasn't used to inspect the tool of destruction. The subsequent scream stalled class. In one act, all heads rotated to one spot to the carnage of my making. Anyway, the day finished in about 2 minutes and we had to hand in our posters. Till the end of term, the result of my actions were plastered on a wall, a smear of black ink over said masterpiece, as a warning to all, never steal my eraser. Story 8. Submitted this in another thread, but I had a girlfriend who basically used me for every single essay she had to do for school and otherwise. She also borrowed money all the time and was an overall witch. She had me write her an admissions essay to use for trying to get into fashion school. Shortly after this, she broke up with me because I wouldn't give her a credit card, so she could rent a van to visit some friends and do whatever else halfway across the country. I ended up calling and emailing the admissions department of each of the schools and just saying that the essays were written by me and plagiarized. I then filled out her information online for every single medical certification school, those let us contact you pages, because she had always said that medical assistant was her backup plan in life, but she hated the thought of it. Story 9. Had a crazy landlord in a college town who rented a house to me and 3 other college guys. Older house, not in great shape, but we didn't care. She would appear at 5 or 6 in the morning on Saturday or Sunday, let herself in, and then scream at us, 4 hungover 19 to 21-year-olds for the state of the place. She would shut off the power if the rent was one day late, would forget to pay the water bill, which would get shut off about every other month, etc. When we moved out, we made sure that every access panel, every switch plate, outlet plate, return air vent, and attic access had raw chicken and or trout stuffed behind it. We also left open jars of peanut butter in the void beneath several cabinets to ensure a mouse problem. Story 10. I used to work in a restaurant with a guy named Chuck. Chuck was a junkyard dog. He'd eat anything, even food off customers' plates. Anytime the kitchen would make food for the servers, he'd swoop in and eat half of it. I got sick of it, so one night I went into the back, got a lump of lard, and rolled it in a coconut. Then I stuck a shrimp tail on the end of it. I tossed it in the deep fryer until the coconut toasted, the perfect fake coconut shrimp. I sat it on a plate and told him it was a leftover from a table. He grabbed it and crammed it down. When he bit down, hot white fat went out. He was incredibly wary about eating crap off plates from that day on. Well, Chuck thought he was getting coconut shrimp, but he got a shock-a-nut instead. Haha, did it again. And like I told you last time, the scriptwriter told me to say it. Lesson learned here, don't mess with the cook's revenge. Story 11. Can't even remember what my brother did to me at the time, but he made me really mad when I was about 5 years old. Later on in the day, he was in the shower and I had to use the bathroom. Being the little evil genius that I was, I figured out how to get my revenge. I opened the bathroom door and he yelled at me to get out, but I lied and told him our dad was in our only other bathroom in our house and I couldn't hold my movements any longer. Anyway, I sit down and drop my deuce while he is still in the shower. Instead of flushing, I stand up, reach in the toilet barehanded, and pick up a nice big pile. I ripped open the shower curtain and hurled said pile right at him. I sincerely can't even remember the details of the aftermath, but I will never forget the range of emotions that I saw flash over his face. When I opened the curtain, he looked so scared and surprised when I threw something at him. As he looked down, his face was starting to scowl out of anger because I threw something at him, but it turned to pure confusion and intrigue. Following the confusion, his brain tried so hard to deny what his eyes were seeing. He wanted to believe it wasn't what he thought it was. The utter disbelief quickly turned into a, wait, there's no way he would throw that at me face with some relief. But after closer inspection, he fully understood that my mess was all over him. The face that followed was a pure mix of anger, total disbelief, and an urgency to get my mess off of him as quickly as possible. He then yelled for our mom and started crying hysterically. About 10 years later, I went to his college to help him move back home for the summer, where he introduced me to some of the kids on the floor. Once they knew I was his little brother, every single one of them went laughing, asking if I was the crap slinger. Supposedly, they had a first day meeting in the residence hall together where everyone had to tell an embarrassing story, and my brother chose that one. What an idiot. Story 12. In high school, I was FWB with a guy, and we would have intimacy pretty often, but one month I was late. I told my best friend, she told her boyfriend, and of course, he told my FWB. Silly me thought he was my boyfriend. In hindsight, it was just me being used. FWB disappears, won't take my calls, nada. I get my period, but say nothing for a month. June rolls around, his birthday is coming up, and so is Father's Day, always a sad time for him since his dad had skipped out on him at an early age. I decided when to strike and how. Bought one of those small plastic containers of chicken livers, took it home, chopped some up, put it in a gallon Ziploc, and poured in some liquid for good measure. Then I make a card and put a message on it. Put the card in the bottom of a small box and set the bag on top of it. Throw in some blue wrapping tissue and wrap it nicely. I wait for a day when he isn't home, a nice hot day, and leave the gift on the steps in his carport. Wish I had seen the look on his face with the chunky bag in one hand and the other hand the card which said, Happy Father's Day, love, your son. No one messed with me in general. This only led to adding to the degree to which I was not messed with. It became somewhat of a local urban legend. No internet back then to debunk and mess up my plan. Story 13. My friend goes to Yale. I go to a decent state university relatively nearby. Every summer, I'll drop by New Haven for a visit. During my first trip down there, I was walking with her boyfriend through the streets to their dorm. This guy, being a senior at Yale, I was a freshman at the time, knew the ins and outs of life on campus. It was about 1 in the morning when we passed by a fairly run-of-the-mill building where he made a point to stop and point it out. See that? He asked. That's where Skull and Bones meet. I was sort of surprised. I had heard all sorts of messed up things about secret ceremonies and presidents and such, but apparently none of these secrets are hidden very well if you've been on campus for long enough and know what's what. Anyway, after wandering into its poorly tended garden, our conversation basically went like this. That's crazy. George Bush was in Skull and Bones, right? I asked. Yeah, screw that guy. Want to whiz on their gate? I didn't give it a second thought. I whipped it out and let a stream splatter so satisfyingly against the building, walkway, and front gate, all the while going, yeah, mother trucker, that's what public school whiz tastes like. Take it. Shove your crappy future presidents right back up, or something to that extent. Eventually, people heard and started coming from behind the gate. We booked it and ran all the way back to their dorm. So horribly petty, but I don't care. Secret societies suck until you're part of the secret. I never really cared for venting about my plebeian woes, so I took that chance to whiz on the legacy that created one of the worst presidents in U.S. history. Story 14. I wasn't part of this, but worked with the person who was. Girl's husband was a real schmuck, cheated, mistreated, etc. Girl decided to get revenge. She worked in the labor and delivery department and took care of newborns in the nursery. After a course of a few weeks or so, she collected the discarded stuff. Once she had collected enough, not sure how you can tell that, she cooked a soup for dinner for her husband. And if I remember correctly, she said it was a Brunswick-type stew. He, as she tells it, ate 2 bowls that night and took the rest to work for lunch the next day. She later described how she could end by getting him passed out. As far as I know, they are divorced now and he's still alive. Story 15. I was a freshman in college and my roommate was, well, loose. She claimed to be a lesbian and talked crap about men all the time, but slept with quite a few men anyways. I didn't judge though. That is until one day we had a get-together with friends and discussion got a little too much information. I ended up admitting I was pure in the process. Now my roommate couldn't let this information go. She made fun of my V card almost daily and kept up with comments like, you need to get some, like it would solve all my problems about insecurity, blah, blah, blah. She tried setting me up with some homophobic schmuck, oddly enough, but that just didn't fly with me. Then she crossed the line when she put a rubber filled with lotion in my bed and it stuck to my leg. And her friend blew up a fruit flavored rubber and hit me in the face with it jokingly. But I was filled with repressed rage. When she was gone for the whole weekend with one of her little buddies, I used her toothbrush to clean my computer keys, very nasty computer keys. I also used it to clean the dusty window and my fish's bowl. I didn't commit a visible, noticeable prank because I knew she would get revenge, and this one just felt wonderful. Story 16. In college, there was a guy who was the most annoying schmuck imaginable that lived in the dorms with us. We had words over something, specifics don't matter. So, a friend of mine and I decided one intoxicated night to show him what we thought of him. For days, we ate asparagus every day in the cafeteria. We whizzed into empty milk jugs to save it. Then, while the schmuck was away, we took a cardboard tube, held it at an angle at the bottom of the door, and poured the whiz down the tube. It gained momentum in the tube and rushed under his door, covering his floor in our foul smelling stuff. Story 17. I don't know how gross this is, but when I was a kid, I lived with my dad in a semi rural area. We lived in a very hot, arid part of Arizona, and our next door neighbor was a gun toting redneck. We had two cats at the time, and one day one of them failed to come into the house when called. We looked all over for her and eventually found her in between ours and our neighbor's house. She had a wound to the chest. We were certain our neighbor had done it since he had complained about our cats crawling around his property, but we had no proof. This was in mid-July, and it was about 110 degrees during the day. In that area, most people use evaporative or swamp coolers. It's essentially a metal box with vents and absorbent pads that are soaked with water and a fan to suck the cool air into your house. Early the next morning, after the neighbor left for work, my dad snuck over and emptied an entire bottle of skunk scent he'd bought from a sporting goods store into the neighbor's swamp cooler. He arrived at home at around 6 that evening and couldn't even get in his house. The smell was so strong. He called animal control because he thought a skunk was in his house and spent 3 days hauling out furniture and airing out his house. It didn't make me miss my cat any less, but it was satisfying in its own right. Story 18. I moved to a new city. After 2 months in the apartment, some new neighbors moved in upstairs. They were absolute craphead hipsters. They would be loud as heck until like 3 or 4 a.m. every night. I talked to them on several occasions trying to find an amicable solution, but it would just exasperate their actions. So I tracked down their emails and phone numbers. I went online and signed them up for everything I could find. Then I found a bunch of those free text notification sites. They would always leave their phones on the floors, and when they'd get a call or text, you could hear the phone vibrate through the ceiling. Then they would come running down the hallway to answer it. When they were up late at night and keeping me awake through earplugs and a white noise generator, I would go and sign them up for text notification after text notification, listening to them run to their phone each time. They actually got quieter and I moved out as fast as I could. Story 19. I once had a very, very sick friend, let's call him Tony, and another, Ryan. Tony wanted revenge on this Ryan for tricking him with a new cell phone number. This kid had posed as a girl and talked to Tony for months using Googled pictures of some pretty girl, only to call him on Christmas, breaking it to him saying, "Merry Christmas, Tony, you silly schmuck." The crap bag contained these ingredients: use protection, a week's worth of dry stuff, and peanut butter. See, Tony was very, very angry, so he hurled the crap bag into Ryan's face the next week at school. Story 20. The best revenge I ever conjured up was after my roommates whizzed on my car. They were upset that I couldn't remember where to score some trees at our apartment complex, but come on, give me a break. I was spiked when I was taken there. Anyway, once I found out, it took me a while to figure out how to get my revenge, but once I did, I knew it would be so much worse than what they did to me. One afternoon, I decided to clean out my roommate's apparatus collection, and coincidentally, I needed to take a leak. I took a whiz right in our community apparatus. To make sure that I wouldn't get caught, I made sure to never partake from that apparatus during 420. They didn't change out the water for at least a week, and every time someone took a hit, I smiled to myself, knowing that they were inhaling my vapors. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 21. Back in college, one of my buddies was a ridiculous party animal. He never drank to get buzzed. He drank to black out. The problem was that every time he would get wasted, he'd stumble over to one of his friends' pads and do messy stuff anywhere his alcohol-addled self saw fit. He seemed to derive an immense amount of satisfaction from waking up the next day and asking us what he did and then howling out in delight, "Ah, no way, I did that." One night after we finally convinced him to host a party at his place, a group of friends and I were pretty intoxicated and decided to get revenge. We started off filling a bunch of red cups with liquid and then placed them all around our passed out friend like traffic cones around a manhole. Emboldened by our intoxicatedness, we decided we needed to do something with stuff. We all headed outside to our friend's car and proceeded to force ourselves to retch all over his black Toyota Camry from trunk to hood. The next morning, we woke our friend up by yelling, "Yo, Jason, someone broke into your car." So he intoxicatedly flails his arms and legs and jumps up, spilling a bunch of the cups on himself in the process, goes to his car and sees it caked in dried stuff. Not only did it take him a decently long time to wash all the stuff off, he had to do it while covered with our mess. Needless to say, he did not appreciate our gag. Ha ha. Story 22. I was on a band trip to California for the Rose Parade, and one of the guys we were rooming with, he was assigned to our room since no one else wanted him, was angering everyone by eating all of our food, poured out fresh coffee because it wasn't his brand, stole one of our phones for the heck of it, stole money, and overall schmuckish behavior. So I decided to get back at him by messing with everything he brought with him. From his special pillow to his phone, we covered just about everything he owned. But as the act of ultimate revenge, we ordered a large pizza, and among 6 guys, we covered it in mess, microwaved it, so the stuff couldn't be seen, and watched him eat the whole dang thing. This was 3 years ago, and he still doesn't know. Wait, so they turned a pizza into a mystery meat special? I hope he at least left a good Yelp review, for the sheer audacity of it all. But wait, he doesn't know. Story 23. There was this old guy who lived right up the street from me as a kid who was a completely combative schmuck, verbally cruel to anyone within earshot. One day when I was about 12, we were playing football in the street and the ball bounced into his front yard. Apparently, he'd been watching us through the blinds because before we could get it, he hobbled his old bum outside and took the ball, refusing to give it back. Recently, my friends and I had made a technological breakthrough which enabled us to fill water balloons with any liquid we wanted. Basically, we had figured out that you can whiz in a bottle, blow a balloon up and pinch it off, then put the blown up balloon on the mouth of the bottle. Turn it upside down and you now have a pressurized liquid-filled balloon. Between me and my 3 friends, we managed to fill up a few balloons and went and unloaded on that schmuck's front door. Best part was it was freezing cold outside and the liquid was still steaming when he opened the door. Story 24. I lived with this guy who was an epic schmuck. Take your typical bad, smelly, rude, disgusting roommate and then multiply it by 1,000 and you're getting close. Long story short, he was very territorial about his donuts and he didn't want anyone to eat them, even though he ate all of our food. So one night he gets intoxicated on our booze, so we decide to play horseshoes with his donuts and his Johnson. Let's just say it looked like one of those kids' toys where the multicolored rings go on the yellow spike. The next morning we made sure that he enjoyed his donuts. It was the only breakfast we all ate at the table together. Story 25. It's a pretty unbelievable story, actually. When I was 19, I had it all going for me. I was going to marry this hot girl, and I just got a big promotion. I worked on a merchant ship. Anyway, on my wedding night, I got dragged away by the police, and long story short, they put me in jail for sympathizing with Bonaparte's supporters. I did nothing of the kind. I carried this one letter to this one dude for my mentor and friend, and evidently that got me mixed up in all of this. So I'm in jail and I meet this educated guy who has been thrown in for his totally reasonable views. We became good pals and he teaches me science, philosophy, math, language. I mean, we had all the time in the frickin' world, right? So fast forward 14 years. Unfortunately, he passed away, but before he did, he told me about this fabulous treasure that he knew about on a nearby island. So I managed to escape. I got the treasure. Now keep in mind what's happened for the past 14 years. I've been in jail, torn away from my beloved fiance. All of a sudden, I'm smart and wealthy and mad, so I disguise myself because I'm a fugitive, right? And find one of my old friends. I found out that he and some of my other friends frickin' framed me because I was doing well in life. 14 frickin' years. I also found out that one of these schmucks married my fiance by taking advantage of her because she's so depressed. So I used my newfound wealth and knowledge to get revenge. I got one guy to end it all, one guy to be driven to insanity, and I got the other guy taken by bandits and then stripped of all his wealth. The rest is kind of a long story, but those are the key parts. Story 26. I worked for KDOT fixing potholes, plowing snow in the winter, fixing signs, stuff like that. Once my coworkers found out I was also in law enforcement, they started to pull stupid pranks on me, just trying to ruin my day for me. Well, I decided I was going to do the same back. I poked a hole in the lid of my water bottle with a thumbtack, discreet water gun, and squeezed the bottle at a few coworkers. After a few days, I did it again. One of the guys left his work boots out, so I had to find a bucket, placed his shoes inside, then filled with water. Since it was Friday afternoon, I, of course, had to put the bucket into the deep freeze so it would freeze solid by Monday morning. Yep, the look on his face was absolutely priceless when he discovered where his shoes went. When I decided to leave the job, I went to the grocery store and purchased some sardine tins. I placed an open tin of sardines inside of the first aid kit inside of each and every dump truck at my substation. During the summer, it took only 2 days with 90-degree temps to really make the trucks extremely rank. Almost 2 weeks go by before they discover the source of the smell and the resulting flies inside the first aid kits. I still smile when I think back to my last day at work giving those witches one last gift to remember me by. Story 27. My freshman year of college, my best friend lived across the hall from me, and her roommate was a huge witch. Made my friend's life a living hell any way she could. Anyways, after listening to my friend cry for hours because of this girl's BS, I decided enough was enough. While her roommate was gone for the weekend, I whizzed in almost everything she owned. We're talking mouthwash, hairspray, her retainer. I let it soak and then dumped out the excess. Basically anything and everything I could possibly get my whiz into. The girl never said anything about it, and her stupidity only lightened up a little. I'm not sure if she ever actually knew, but it was definitely worth it to see my friends smile and laugh after 2 semesters of crying. Story 28. I should start this story off by saying that waiting to lose my V card to a girl I was in love with was a big deal to me. When I was 18, I started dating this girl who I fell head over heels for. She was beautiful, sweet, and we shared a lot of great memories with each other at first. As it turned out, however, she had a bit of a promiscuous history. During this time period, she cheated on me and we broke up. A couple months later, she called to say that she was truly sorry for what she did and that she loved me, wanted to get back together, and more than anything, wanted to make love. I finally lost my V card that night. Unfortunately, when I called her the next day, she said she had just said that to sleep with me. I was heartbroken. A couple of weeks later, I had a little too much to drink and decided to play a little prank on her. I called her crying and I told her I had just gotten news from the doctor that I was HIV positive and that she was likely the only person that could have given it to me. By the end of the conversation, I had gotten so into character that I had convinced both her and her girlfriends that indeed we both had it. I passed out and woke up to like 36 voice messages, most of them from her mother. As it turned out, she went home that night, woke up and told her parents, then drove over to the man who she assumed gave it to her by pulling him out of his bed and harming him with his current girlfriend watching in horror. She then proceeded to call every single person she'd ever slept with, which happened to be most of our town, including the entire local college baseball team. It wasn't long before all of them rushed to get tested, eventually realizing it was just a hoax. The rest of that week, I received threats and I was nearly disowned from anyone close to the situation. I suppose, if nothing else, HIV awareness rose in popularity that week, but unfortunately, I moved 2 weeks later and was unable to witness if any long-term effects were ever fully realized. Story 29. I was casually dating a guy in college when he decided that he might be gay. No problem. He invited me out one night with a guy he was interested in for what I thought was a casual evening. We ended up at a cheap motel where I found out that his plan was to get this straight guy spiked and intoxicated and then have me seduce him, then get the heck out and let him have his way with this unsuspecting guy. I was horrified. So I made sure that we drank all the booze, smoked all his trees, and after he passed out on the floor, I fooled with the other guy anyway. Story 30. I had a Bible thumping neighbor who would always call the cops on me and my friends when we were having barbecues when I was about 17. They could never find us doing anything illegal, and after about the third week of summer, the cops started calling ahead so I would throw some burgers on the barbecue for them. Well, I had had about enough of having to not drink during my BBQs, even though the cops were hella nice and hated the lady as much as I did. So I waited till they went on vacation one week. Now they lived in this split level on a hill, so it was easy to get under and it was on a lake. So I caught some trout and saved them up for about a week. I think it was about 30 of them. I froze half and left the other half fresh. I crawled under their house and proceeded to push the trout into their insulation, up their dryer hoses, inside their water heater, in their wood pile, basically everywhere I could hide them. And to top it off, they left their bathroom window just enough open to put a package of 1,500 fire ants, including the queen, into their bathroom. The fresh fish they found pretty quickly when they got back, but the frozen ones in the insulation took a couple weeks to rot. Needless to say, they left me alone after that. Another story from the same neighbors, their septic system had failed and was running into my yard, and they were refusing to fix it, so I dug a curtain drain in front of it and routed all that fresh crap right back under their house. They hate me to say the least, but they don't mess with me anymore. Story 31. So we lived in a pretty nice upscale suburban neighborhood and were throwing a party. A guy who had just moved in across the street asks him if he stops by, and we say sure. Well, he decided to bring his redneck friends, and they basically came, drank a crap ton of beer, and then left without contributing to the alcohol in any way. Since he lived across the street, I decided that I'd be a schmuck. I bought some yellow jacket attractant and sprayed it in the bushes next to their front door. During the winter, I sprayed skunk screen on their welcome mat and poured the rest of the bottle into their air conditioning unit. They never had any idea why they were infested with yellow jackets or where the stink came from. It was great. Story 32. I'm in college now. A freshman year, a bunch of us are drinking in a friend's dorm room, playing beer pong, etc. And there's a beer pong table in the middle of the room with red party cups strewn across it. My friend couldn't be bothered to walk 10 feet down the hallway to use the restroom, so he whizzed in one of the cups without me noticing. Later on, thinking that it was filled with beer, I chugged it. Everyone had a laugh about that, except me. Fast forward a year and a half, a frat at our school throws an annual party at a local campground where there's hundreds of kegs. People bring their own container to drink out of. Pitchers and milk jugs are common choices for this. The friend whose liquid I drank brought a plastic jug that used to have juice in it or something like that. Later in the day, everyone is good and wasted. I ran into another friend who, for some reason, has friend's jug. I told him to give it to me immediately. I whizzed in it, then filled the rest with beer to make it look to my friend like I had just filled his jug for him at one of the kegs. I told him the next day, and he was mad. Revenge, when given a year and a half to cook, is always sweet. Story 33. When I was in elementary school, this older kid, Neil Matthews, would always hurt the crap out of me around the neighborhood. You know, knock me down, steal my bike, and leave it a mile away on the side of the road. It really sucked. Then one day, my little brother got a new swing set as a birthday present. I took the swing chain from the old set and coiled it in the pocket of my members-only jacket. Later that day, Neil found me and began his typically cruel behavior. I took out the chain and began to swing it like a vengeful KitchenAid mixer, not knowing what else to do. He laughed, so I hit him with the chain, and again, when it stopped spinning, I just hurt him with it. He stopped laughing, then he cried, then he ran. He never bothered me again. Story 34. A friend at school stole my car keys one day and made a copy. For a week or two, he would randomly move my car to different parts of the school parking lot. I told him, if you steal my car again, I'm going to crap on your truck. That week, as I walked out to my car after school, I watched him drive away in it, laughing. I then proceeded to crap on a newspaper in the bed of his truck and then placed it on the windshield. He did not take my car again. Story 35. I got fired from my job because of a personal conflict my manager had against me. It being an at-will state, I couldn't do anything. Well, I was very disgruntled because she was an absolutely crappy manager, and her conflict was that I refused to let her pester me anymore and stood up to her. Well, anyway, me and my buddy took a gallon Gatorade jug and on one intoxicated night filled it with liquid. We then proceeded to stake out her house until one night she left her car windows down just a crack. Luckily, it was a hot and humid night and we poured that crap through a funnel that was connected to a hose within her car. My friend proceeded to retch uncontrollably due to the smell. Unfortunately, we didn't stay to see her expression, but thanks to some ex coworker friends, I found out she had called off for the next few days due to it. We dubbed this concoction Haterade and swore to never produce another. The weapon might possibly cause global extinction. Story 36. My neighbor made me mad. Doesn't matter why. Began leaving mysterious fluids and parts under his new car, an Impala SS. One of the random fluids was Whiz, which I enjoyed watching him swipe his finger through it and try to identify by smell. When he finally started parking it in the garage, I actually used a slingshot to fling some random bolts into the garage as the door was closing. I couldn't figure out a way to fling the stuff in, though. This was before super soakers, unfortunately. The dealer's loaner car spent a lot of time at his place. They must have thought he was crazy or trying to screw them. He traded the SS in after only a year. Who wants a car that leaks? Story 37. I had a friend. This friend was dating someone. That someone lived quite far away. This person was kind of a schmuck, one of those LJ girls who intentionally provoke internet drama so they can complain about it. They ended up breaking up with my friend in a pretty humiliating way. It was pretty messed up. My partner and I did not like this person. I went down to SoCal where my partner lived. We had intimacy and somewhere along the lines of before or after it, fooling around. I trimmed my partner's extremely fuzzy happy trail into a Kleenex. I looked up and jokingly said, "Now, who should we mail this to?" Did you know that I have friend's ex-partner's address? A degree of focus came as I met this person's eyes. It was nearing Valentine's Day. We decided to mail this person a Valentine, specifically a hair Valentine with her favorite anime character drawn for her in crayon. The idea was that when she opened it, hairs would fly out everywhere and bedazzle her area of residence. We were giggling so hard while we were doing it, we could barely stay still to document our disgusting exploits. And the next few days, we watched her social networking site with all of her friends and saw her reaction. Story 38. I've mentioned I worked at a university in the security department. People would park on our campus when pro football games were nearby. It would take up the parking for the dorm residents, which would naturally piss them off. During one such game, a student dropped a paper bag on the counter window of the security office, saying, "Someone lost this." This was the good old days when video camera systems were very expensive and we had none. It was a bag full of valve stems. He'd pull all of the valve stems from every car in the dorm parking he didn't recognize. It was a small school, so as luck would have it, he only got non-students. Story 39. I lived in a 4-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates. Myself and one guy were cool with each other, but we constantly butted heads with the other 2. The other 2 would never pay their bills or rent on time. They were filthy, and worst of all, they would eat everything I and the other roommate bought. We talked to them about it several times, left notes on containers, and even fist fought over it. We eventually had to move everything into our bedrooms. Well, we had grown tired of it, so we devised the old routine laxative prank. We made a huge pitcher of Kool-Aid and smashed up 2 boxes of laxatives into powder and stirred it in. We used 2 boxes because we wanted to get them good and figured they'd only maybe drink only 1 cup. Within 20 minutes of making the Kool-Aid, I went back into the kitchen and the whole goddamn pitcher was empty. And I started thinking, oh crap, I'm seriously going to end my roommates with frickin' laxative? So I get concerned and run to their bathroom and steal their frickin' toilet paper. Ha ha. Those sorry schmucks were sick as crap for the better part of 24 hours. They asked me for some toilet paper and I lied and told them I didn't have any. They were in a world of hurt. They went on a mean hunt for toilet paper and finally ended up using my coffee filters. And if any of these stories got to you, a few certainly got to me. Here's more for us. YouTube thinks you're going to love this one. I'll catch you in that video. Thanks for watching.